Stephanie?
What's that?
All set there, Stephanie?
Yeah.
Are you leaving your scarf on?
What's that?
Are you leaving your scarf on? You could if you want. Let's go right about here somewhere. Let's go that side. Okay, now there's a power switch.
Good morning,
So
staff.
if you go to the
From
bathroom, shut it off.
KPI, we are
Because it'll
about
pick you
to
up.
start our winter teaching. We'd like to get everybody down to
Then
room
your
103. We're about to start the winter teaching.
Your pockets.
Okay. And where's the power?
Right in between. Just switch off, switch off.
Okay, so it can go off.
Okay. Does this work? Is it working? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Today is Tuesday, January 28, 2014, and today we are holding our winter teaching at KTEI. The topic for this teaching is the First Nation Education Act. For some of you who do not know what a teaching is a form of nonviolent protest which uses one of the most powerful tools of all, education empowerment. The goal of the teaching is to bring awareness about a topic and issues and encourage the people to act on them. So as you sit and listen to our guest speakers, keep in mind the message that they are giving you. At the end of the session, you will have the opportunity to ask questions to the guest panel, and we hope you leave here with a better understanding of the First Nation Education Act and how it will impact you, your children, your community, and your people. Miigwech. We're going to start off our morning with our elder Josh Ashkakigan.
Miigwech, Mikijep Minanango, Nobamad Zwid Wing. Na ako kwem tag na nango. Sunset, we magaman bejo magamwin. Mishpanani, preamble jo kwena maingpi. Sunset. Tanani wim.
Hare
Oh, just remain standing, please. Sorry. The preamble that was created by the elders within the UCCMM. And this is a preamble that we're addressing in regards to the issue that's also talked about today. Mimande Nwing, Nungwadan Nigazit Nishnabe. They mentioned get the East Side and Nishnabe a king. He been going to God there, no do others with. Shkude, Nube, a ke, Nodin. He would listen there, we don't get in among Pish Kakamaran. They mentioned get the Yiminan, get your trend docking, and Nishnabe. One dungeon, and then he's also kilometer with him. Saga win, Debo win, not in the win. Boka win, but in this win, we quads win, we know Akade win. They bench get, Kimino gonna dead bin way, we not get end win. Come not in Dana, Gabe Juebuk, no one go make a voice Juebuk. We know Gabe, one is Juebuk. Oh, miigwech. Aha.
Okay. Now we're going to have a welcoming from our Student Council President, April McDowell.
Ani Bojo, I'd like to thank everybody for coming here today. And my name is April McDowell, President of the Student Council. Enjoy yourselves. Miigwech.
Okay, so our winter teaching on the First Nation Education Act is also a new breaking ground for us at KTI, as we are now presenting this as a live feed. So we welcome all those that are on the live feed. Welcome to our winter teaching, and we hope we get some feedback from you on how that went through your computers, wherever you are across the North Shore. Welcome. We also like to remind you to turn your cell phones off, please, while the speakers are presenting, in respect. And we would like to now start off with an opening from our host drum from Serpent River First Nation. And they will be doing an opening song, and followed by that, we will have our first guest speaker, which will be Stephanie Roy, with her perspective on education. So, our drum. we're going to follow up with our first guest speaker, Miigwech. Okay.
Hello. Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, everybody. Minok Kasheb. It's really good to see everybody, and I know we're here for a very important topic, and it's certainly an important topic for everybody that has made an effort to be here today. Can I just get a sense of who you are and that you're joining us today? So I'm just going to be able to, if you can just give me a quick show of hands. A quick show of hands. If you're a student, can you put up your hand? Awesome, we're glad you're here with us today. If you're a teacher working in education or a principal, can you put up your hand? Oh, we see many of you out there. We're glad you've joined us. If you work in education or you're a worker in the communities, can you give me a show of hands? And if you're a community member on Manitoulin, can I get a show of hands? Lots of community members on Manitoulin. We're glad you joined us. That is an indication of, if you were able to put your hand up, that this First Nations Education Act is going to affect every one of us in one way or another. Whether you're a student, whether you're a parent, whether you're a community member, whether you work in education. I hope that I can take a few minutes, and I know I'm on a timed clock here, so I'm going to really do my best to go as quickly as I can through some aspects of understanding the First Nations Education Act, but really trying to get an awareness about what it's going to mean and the impact that it has. So I'm going to go through that as quickly as I can, and I'm going to try to not talk so fast because I tend to talk fast, but I really want to be able to impart an awareness and understanding about what the Education Act is all about and how it's going to impact all of us if this act passes through legislation and it actually becomes law for our communities right across this country. So with that, I'm going to try to be techno-savvy today, and I'm going to do my best to move along. And we'll see how it goes here. Maybe I'm out of power, I'm not sure.
Aim straight.
Arrow and aim straight.
Arrow right.
Okay, you got it. Okay. So what I want to be able to share with all of you is we are going to learn about the Education Act, and I'm going to bring some context to it at a technical level as much as possible. But before I do that, I want us to also be able to have some insight into not just the Education Act itself, but what does it mean for us in education, and what does First Nations education look like, and what's the purpose of education? So if the purpose of education is to ensure that our students, our children acquire the skills to be successful academically as well as culturally competent, then that's what we need to keep in mind as we look at what the First Nations Education Act is about. So at its very simplest level, if that's what we believe education to be, then I ask you to keep that in mind as we discuss the Education Act. With that, when we're talking about the academic rigors and graduating with a high school diploma, we all want that. There isn't a person in Canada that doesn't want that for our children. With that, I'm saying as First Nations people, we have to also understand that our ways of knowledge and how we transmit education from generation to generation for the last 500 years has always been grounded in our ceremonies, but it's also been that formed the basis of the governance structures. It also told us about our roles and responsibilities, but it also ensured that we had the responsibility and duty to respect Mother Earth, to respect the land, the water, the resources. And when we're talking about education, we can't talk about education without understanding that as well. So that history is also important in who we are as a people. So I don't want us to forget about our history, and is that going to be an important component of the Education Act. The treaty aspect of Canada. Let's at least understand the treaty perspective and whether there's perspective that's going to allow for this in the Education Act itself. I know I'm on time here, so I'm going to zoom as quickly as I can. At the very end, we're going to talk about after the Education Act, what do we feel the impact is going to be, and I want you to also think of what that'll look like if it's implemented or if it becomes law. Okay. Really quickly, as I mentioned already, when we look at education, it's important for us to understand our treaties and why our education is funded the way it is. And if we understand our history and our treaties, we'll understand the importance of the role the First Nations Education Act is going to play. When we talk about our histories and what's taught in our schools and the curriculum, we have to understand that the treaties played an important role in the nation-to-nation relationship. And when we looked at the treaties and what they mean right across Canada or right across North America, that Aboriginal title and the agreement to be able to coexist moving forward after those treaties were signed gave us and laid the foundation about jurisdiction, control, and the education components of what would be paid for as a part of those treaties. So we can't really go into the Education Act unless we have a firm understanding of that treaty relationship and what the importance of those treaties mean. Okay, I don't know what's happening to my, oh, here, that's me. Here I'm in, I'm upside down. So when we look at treaties for our area, Robinson Huron, we need to be able to understand what those treaties mean to us and how does that apply to how we do business today. When we look at the technical components of the First Nations Education Act, what we have to understand is the government has made these efforts over the last, or a concerted strategy for the last 10 years, but we've seen it played out in a lot of reports that have been released over the past 5 years. One of these reports that led up to this proposed bill is called the Blueprint to First Nations Education Legislation. This blueprint was released this past summer, and what was in the blueprint itself is, really quickly, was it was this panel that went right across Canada to visit First Nations that had schools and said, what's working, what isn't working, how can we improve education? So they call it a blue ribbon panel. They set out their visits right across Canada, and they were looking for the solutions for how can we improve the education systems. So what happened is, in that final report, they put forth some recommendations, and what the government did was and from a First Nations perspective, what they heard and what they proposed were two diverging points that didn't match with what communities said right across Canada. So I think that's important to know that what they heard and what they proposed had no alignment. When we look at the First Nations Education Act, I just want to share one quote with you because this leads up to why the proposal of the bill is coming forth from the government. And this is a quote that has been shared by a former Ontario Regional Chief Angus Toulouse when he spoke to the Standing Committee. He says that First Nations education is in crisis. In some First Nation communities, a staggering 7 out of 10 students will not graduate from high school this year. Far too many others, countless First Nations children will never attend a school equipped with libraries, science labs, or athletic facilities. And incredibly, in a country as rich as ours, some First Nations will never set forth in a proper school. When we look at a statement like this and we work in education, unfortunately, this is true. And when we look at why is it that when we're trying our best, we work with many schools who really put forth their best efforts in terms of resources and trying to deliver a quality education system. As we go on in the presentation, I hope that we come back to this, but statements like this, we're saying we're willing to look at how do we improve our education systems in our communities. But let's do so on our terms and let's co-create what that looks like. The other piece that we're all, I'm sure you're all well aware of, is this First Nations Education Act has been opposed by leaders right across this country, whether it's locally, provincially, nationally, it's been opposed. Really quickly here, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it other than to say there is a timeline. There were documents over the last 5 years that looked at rolling out this legislation to what it was when it was released this past fall. There's been different initiatives that the government has looked at, and 5 years ago they started to say we need to look at improving the structure of First Nations education and how can we do that. When we look at this bill that's going to be taking effect, it was proposed to take effect for this fall of 2014. So in a few months, if the Conservative government has their way, they anticipated that this would be released and it would be in place. So when we look at the timelines, of course, are quickly approaching. Is that still the timeline? We don't know at this point, but that was what the government has released. And it's been a lot of planning on the government's part. Part of the concerns that we have within the Education Act itself, I'm just going to go through a few slides and give you one of the reasons why we look at why the Education Act is proposed is the pillars that have been identified, or the springboard to it, was because there's a lack of service levels in each and every school right across Canada. They said, let's look at some type of standardization. So they said, there's not a consistent level of service quality. There's not a consistent level of organizational supports. For example, like KTEI, right across Canada, some schools have support, some don't. But also the other pieces is looking at the funding pieces, and what happens in each and every school is different from school to school. I want to go quickly here because Mary's giving me the cue. And I want to go right to the options of if we can. So the biggest piece in the Education Act itself and that we must understand is how are things going to change. So the biggest change that we're going to see is the governance and accountability piece of how each community does education. So right now in the Education Act, it proposes that there's going to be specifically 3 options, perhaps 4. So in the options itself, I always say behind door number 1 is the option that you have is that schools can continue to operate as independents. That's option 1 that you'll have under the Education Act. So if schools decide to continue to operate on their own, they'll be required to operate on their own, but they'll also be required to carry out all of the standards that are going to be put forth in the legislation. So the legislation itself is going to be very prescriptive on what you must do, and all schools will be required to do it, even if you stand alone. This is just an example. So if any of the communities decide to do that, they're certainly open to doing it, but the government has said in this act itself that they're going to get no new funding to do it. So you're going to be required to do what you do more with what you do, but you're not going to get any more funding to do it. Number 2 is an option, and it's behind door number 2 is you can purchase services from a provincial school board. That's an option. So if schools on reserve want the provincial school boards to run their school, that's an option if the community so choose to do that. Behind door number 3 is the option that is put forth is that schools can aggregate. So schools can come together, pool their resources, and aggregate and form a legal entity. So in many respects, if you have 10 schools that choose to work together, those 10 schools will come together and they'll be able to sort of run a mini school board, and that's what it is. We, as First Nations, we said a mini First Nation school board approach, and then the government will give resources to be able to support the system in that respect. The other option as well is if there's territories that are in self-governing agreements. In our territory, it's the Union of Ontario Indians, and they call it the ROJ. So in those agreements, if communities opt to join those education agreements that are already looking at self-governing, where education is being negotiated, then those communities or those communities will be exempt from participating in the Education Act. So the Education Act won't apply to them. So those are the 4 options that are put forth in the Act itself. And when the communities pick one of those 4 options, then that'll determine how the system is going to be run in terms of programming, in terms of the standards that are set. And when we're talking about the minimum standards, it's always about what's the content going to be in the schools. And I think that's one thing that we have to be cognizant of. Whether it's one of those 4 options, each community is going to identify for themselves what they feel is best. Really quickly, just right here, I know you're all thinking, so based on working with the schools, what's the best option that you think is happening? We work with many communities. We work with approximately 14 different communities, and all of those communities are at different places. Some of them are saying, you know what, I think I'm going to go with option 1, which was under that door when we said that's an independent community. So they're saying, and they're picking that because it's about the control and jurisdiction, and it goes back to those treaty rates. So they're saying nobody's going to tell us what to do. I think I'm going to go under option number 1. But with option number 1, your hands are still tied because you're still going to have to be under some level of compliance. The other piece that we're looking at is many of our communities are going to enter into the self-governing agreements that the union has been working on for the last 17 years. So some of the communities are saying, this looks like the best option for me, so they're certainly looking at that option as well. But none of the communities are on a firm commitment at this point, but they're certainly thinking about what options are best for their communities. So when we look at really what What is the Education Act going to be? It means that we're going to be held to a level of accountability that's going to be very specific on what we have to do in our schools. When we're looking at what it is, the biggest concerns are, again, it goes back to the jurisdiction, the control of our education systems in our communities. Is it going to allow for what the purpose of education is, as I mentioned? We're talking about is it going to allow for better outcomes and having students graduate at a greater level than what they're doing right now? Funding. Funding is one of the biggest concerns as well. We can't talk about education without talking about funding. The challenges that we have is if we're able to deliver education, I'm just going to use an example. If the education we've been provided has been, what we're given is, I'm just going to say $1 to operate our system, the school next door will get $2 to operate their system, and what we need is $3. So it's always about the funding that's required. And is the system going to allow for language, culture, and our traditions and cultural practices in the system? Is there going to be that flexibility? And that's something that we're pretty sure there's not going to be a whole lot of flexibility. It may be an add-on, but it's not going to be the foundational component that we aspire education to be when it's educating our children. As we move forward, I think it's important that everybody make that decision for themselves. You make your voice heard, and whatever that may be, we have to understand that if this does become law, we are going to be expected to comply. And when we're expected to comply, that means somebody is monitoring the accountability piece, and we will have those inspectors in our schools that we presently don't have right now. So there's a real difference, and the real difference is the funding piece. When we look at each of those models, the funding will change when those agreements are in place. So if you pick door number 1, the funding will continue to go to the community. If you pick door number 2, which is the provincial schools, the payment will be directly to the provincial system. And if you pick door number 3, the funding won't go to the communities, it'll go to that aggregated body. And under door number 4, the funding will go to the self-governing holder of that agreement, which is the ROJ. So in a nutshell, I ask that you decide and you think of whether this is a good fit for education for our future generations, and we need to decide if that law in itself is going to allow us to be able to educate our children with not only the academic skills, but also the cultural competencies that we want to ensure is transferred from generation to generation. So with that, I say miigwech.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephanie Roy, our Education Director from KTEI, for her perspective on the educational point. Now we're going to ask Grand Chief Patrick Madabi to come up and give us the political view on the First Nation Education Act.
Closer because of the speaker.
Bonjour. Vidasa Dijnakas, on the Kamnakani, Donjaba. Chmigwech Kanaway Vjain Mampi Nango. Well, also thank Kinjgawintek for hosting this teach-in, and to our elder for opening up in the proper manner, and for the drum as well for that beautiful song. You know, what was mentioned here in the earlier presentation, you know, I heard the word compliance and control quite a bit. And you know, we're in a situation where perhaps in no other time in our history do we have a daunting challenge ahead of us, but also perhaps one of the greatest opportunities I think we've ever had is to take control over our own education. This is something that has been developed and worked on since 1972, and it started right here right here on Medina Missing. And we have a situation where, along comes Indian Affairs, who have tried many experiments in the past, where they've said, their solution is to take the Indian out of the child by putting him in a residential school. They tried an experiment years ago called the cold water experiment, where they tried to make the Anishinaabe people civilized by teaching them farming. Where our people lived out in the land in their own way. And they've tried many other experiments, and every one has failed. You know why our system will work? Because we have the greatest thing at stake here is our children. And we're going to ensure success for our children. So this Education Act has been opposed vigorously right across the country. And this has been no consultation. I mean, the panel that was talked about, and there was a consultation as well by bureaucrats within the Indian Affairs that went to urban centers. The one in Ontario was held in Thunder Bay with very minimal participation, and the chiefs that did go in there went in there basically on the premise of protecting their interests and to see what these guys were doing. And they had very little information, these bureaucrats. And there's been very little information because this consultation has not been upheld, and the sessions really did not merit anything because they're not listening. This is typical of this Harper government. Remember, the Harper government is the old Reform Alliance Party that said First Nations have no rights. Keep that in mind. And it's our experience that they've got tactics. Watch what they do. Like right now, they've announced that they're going to announce a budget speech in February, and it's a lead into election, and they'll start handing out the goodies next year in time for their election. Propaganda. They announced this First Nations Governance Act in October of 2013. First of all, the first two statements out of the minister's mouth was that if this thing is going to be implemented, it'll be controlled by the minister. And secondly, no new money. When was mentioned here that they're not listening, again, this is just, to use the legal terminology, a pile of crap, because there has been many, many studies. There's been the Penner report, the Nielsen Task Force report, their own Indian Affairs initiative called Gathering Strength, which is now Gathering Dust. They had the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples. They had the Kelowna Accord. They've had the Charlottetown and Meech Lake Accord. All attempts, and even the constitutional discussions, all attempts to find out what First Nations want. And we've told them time and time again. They just aren't listening. And even on this issue, they're not listening. So the first thing it does, it increases the minister's control over First Nation education and forces First Nations to make any progress or digression available to the general public regardless of a broken system. And, a lot of times, we want to put the blame game. And they say that if you watch history and have studied history, people that oppress people around the world do two things. They make sure they're not educated, and they keep them in poverty. Guess what's happening in Canada, folks? They say we have no money, no resources, and that's one of the key issues that's necessary here on this whole issue of our education, is to put the proper resources in place. Because we have a discrepancy of anywhere from $10,000, $2,000 to $10,000 of a funding gap per capita from an on-reserve to an off-reserve public school system. And when we go and negotiate with them, they say there's no money. You know, this week alone, I heard the Prime Minister announce $155 million for a Syrian refugee camp. I heard him announce $115 million for settlements around Jerusalem. There's been, we're going to match disaster relief funds in the Philippines. Start out at, you know, a minimal amount, and grew to $5 million, then to $15 million, and $25 million, and now I don't know what the amount is that they're going to match. In Afghanistan, they've, when they said there's no money for schools, they built 20 schools in Afghanistan. So there's something wrong with this picture, folks. And also, you know, you hear groups such as the Canadian Taxpayers Association raising hell about how First Nations are unaccountable, but you don't hear them talking about the Prime Minister, you know, who is giving money away all over the world. And it's not just with First Nations. You know, if they can fix up things around the world, you know, what about the poor people in Winnipeg that are suffering from floods and haven't even moved back into their houses yet, let alone the Native people? Canadians themselves are being abused by this government. So this potential transfer of that they're talking about really is a giant step from First Nations governance and away from Indian control of Indian education. And it transfers some constitutional responsibility that First Nation education has from the federal government to the provincial government, and requires us to comply with provincial standards without making a commitment to funding in order to meet those standards. Now, I will have to say one thing at this juncture. We have been negotiating an Anishinaabeg education system for quite a number of years now. It's been mentioned 17 years, probably over 18 years now. But we do have, I think, some positive relationships with the province. It's the federal government that seems to be the stick in the mud here. The province is looking at a master education agreement and working with us to acknowledge our curriculum, our culture, our languages, you know, and our history. The federal government wants more control. So, and it also takes the onus of liability off the Crown and places the liability directly on First Nations without funding, and ignores treaty obligations, as was mentioned here. And one of the first things that the minister also said in his remarks was, if you do not comply, we will put you in third-party management. You know, that's like saying, you know, here's a shotgun to your head. We're nice guys, but if you don't listen, we're going to pull the trigger. You know, that's the attitude this federal government has with First Nations. When I said earlier, keep in mind that they don't believe we have any rights, you know, keep in mind there's other legislation that they've done, such as this omnibus bill, which does an end run around our Aboriginal treaty rights, which are protected in the Constitution, by allowing resource extraction and development to happen in our territories without acknowledgement of our treaties. This education thing is also something that they're not acknowledging, of our right to our own governance, our own culture, our own education practices. And this is from a government that touts itself as being, you know, promoting law and order in Canada. And they're breaking their own laws left and right here, including the highest law in the land, which is the Constitution, which we fought to put our rights into the Constitution under Section 35. So, this does not recognize First Nations authority to create our own education law. It simply allows for the creation of bylaws consistent with, like, municipalities or the present Indian Act bylaws that still have you have to get the permission of the minister, and yet it just creates a broader window for the minister to create more regulations. You know, it sometimes just astounds me, you know, that they just don't get it. You know, and every time they have tried, you know, and I refer to them as experiments, tinkering with our children, you know, it has always failed. And why would we ever let them do that again? After what they did to us in the residential schools and in the 60s scoop. So, you know, part of my remarks here today is to say, no ifs, ands, and buts, we are going to continue to oppose this bill. And they think, you know, they're going to ram it through. you know, like because they have this majority government. Well, we've stopped them before. We stopped the imposition of a First Nations Governance Act. In the past, I was going to create a municipal style of governance. You know, we stopped the imposition of the HST, as an example. And they're messing with the wrong people this time, because if they start messing with our children, our strongest warriors are going to rise up. That's our grannies, our mothers, our aunties. You know, the real nurturers of our children, the real teachers of our children. Because they're not going to allow this to happen again. And we can't allow it to happen again. So we've developed our own system, the Anishinaabe education system. And this thing, I get pretty excited and passionate about, because this was not developed by politicians, was not developed by bureaucrats. It was developed by people from your communities, your frontline education experts, the teachers, the principals, the education boards, your trustees. You know, it has, and community input. It's community driven. So we're going to be putting something in place ourselves. And this is a time when we need unity like never before. Because we have to get one thing first. That's jurisdiction. This is also another part of where the government is breaking law. Under the constitutional patriation that took place in 1982, there was mandated a follow-up meeting within 1 year of that 1982 patriation of the Constitution that called for a meeting to sort out jurisdiction. What's federal jurisdiction? What's provincial jurisdiction? What's First Nation jurisdiction? And where there may be areas of shared jurisdiction. Well, guess what? That got bounced off the table by Quebec separatism. It bounced off the table because of Western alienation and the desire of these governments to stay in power. You know, even during the constitutional talks, and I can tell you this firsthand because I was there. I was one of the Ontario negotiators. And they actually took the protection of Aboriginal treaty rights out of the Constitution. It was originally Section 34. And in order to try to get René Lévesque and Quebec to come on board and to get some compliance from some of the Western provinces, they removed any protections of Aboriginal treaty rights in the Constitution. And we had to fight back, and it became Section 35, Aboriginal treaty rights being recognized under Section 35. So we have an education system that's sensitive to our culture, our language, our communities. But the federal government has been stringing us along. You know, we've been in these negotiations for over 18 years. And we're still negotiating. They're not looking at resourcing any infrastructure or capital. I guess they expect our children to be, and what the one slide said, and you know, never see a school that's a proper school. You know, this isn't a new thing. I remember one of the early activists a long time ago dumping a pile of rats on the Minister of Indian Affairs' desk because she said, these are the rats that are in our school in our community. And you've heard about, you know, Shannon's dream. You know, that young lady, you know, committed to getting a school in her community. You know, what does it take for these people to listen? You know, their solutions have never worked. Right now, we have been developing as the Anishinaabe Nation not only an education system that is more reflective of what our communities want, but it's also more inclusive in terms of the ongoing direction and control of our people. We have an education authority that will be set up, but regionally we will have clusters of communities that are set up in regional education councils that will have representation from each community that will direct what happens in terms of language and culture, curriculum, history. Right now we have a system under the, you know, where we have a large Rainbow School Board with 11 First Nations involved. We have one Native trustee. Unfortunately, we have another trustee from the island here that is you know, quite supportive of First Nation issues. He's in the audience, Larry Killens. Well, thank you for that, Larry. But, you know, we have something. We have an opportunity here. I don't know how much time I have left. I've been ignoring time clock. How much time have I got? 5 minutes? I might not take that long. But anyway, we have an opportunity here, you know, to do what was said we were going to do back in 1972, was regain control of Indian education. We got to stay united. We got to stay focused. We've got to get the jurisdiction. We can develop various models afterwards. Let's fight to get this control. We can find ways to adapt and tweak a system. But because it'll be ours. It'll be our way of doing things. So we've been embarking, the Anishinaabe Nation is going to be working on a lobbying and advocacy strategy. We're in conjunction with the Chiefs of Ontario. Although this has been opposed right across the country, there is a role for the AFN to play, I think, in opening up some doors, at least to create a process, I think, at a much higher level, not only on this, but on treaty discussions that are going on. And the government, you know what their solution has been, is to come and have some bureaucrats come and talk to us. They called it a Senior Oversight Committee, which was made up of bureaucrats from the Privy Council and the Prime Minister's Office and Indian Affairs, who don't have any authority to make a decision. You know, they always got to go running back to the politicians. But we've had meetings before where we've gotten results. We've had ministerial level meetings that led to the constitutional talks. We've had high level discussions, you know, right across the country that developed the Kelowna Accord. That would have been the solution to our education, our housing, our governance, all these issues that we're dealing with. The Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, if they would have implemented the recommendations in there, we wouldn't be having this discussion. But here we go again. You know, never get fooled by this government that is still trying to maintain control. Never get fooled by a government that's trying to steal all our resources. Never get fooled by a government that continues to perpetuate a membership registration code in the Indian Act that is a form of genocide. I don't know if you knew it here in this room, but one of our communities within the Anishinaabe Nation, Scugog, in 2013, was the last year that they have anyone that is eligible to be registered as a status Indian because of the sections under the Indian Act registration system. So what does that mean? Under the British North America Act, it says Indians and lands reserved for Indians. If you don't have any Indians, guess what? They take the land. They take the resources. So keep the Indian uneducated, keep them in poverty. That's the game. You know, they're ignoring the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. They're ignoring constitutional law. They're ignoring over 170 major court cases that we've won. But I don't think they can ignore those grannies. I don't think they can ignore those mothers and aunties and our men that need to back up our women when we're going to go into this fight. Because in no way, shape, or form can we allow them to repeat what they've done to our kids again. So that's why we need to develop our own control, our own jurisdiction, and our own forms of our own education systems. So with that, I don't know if my time is up. I guess I'm getting the nod. Better get out of here before I get the hook. Jimmy Gretsch for listening to me. And I guess I'm going to be on a panel here a little bit later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to Grand Chief Patrick Madabi. Now we're going to listen to our National Youth Rep, Quinn Miyawasagi. And just a heads up, we have 95 plus online viewers. Stay tuned, here comes the youth empowerment. Take it away, Quinn.
Honey bonjour. Ishtam ki waiting on nani board in nation cause. Go out them. Chicken base being don't ba. Jibu nishnabe and dao. Morning everybody. It's good to see so many young people here. It makes me feel good. You know, I walked into this building, you know, I wondered what the Kijgawan Institute was. You know, I was like, you know, that sounds pretty cool. Sounds like, you know, a niche word, you know, sounds like they're on the right track, you know. And I get here and I'm just like, wow. You know, I was just like, look at this place. You know, I'm thinking to myself, you know, if we had this, I'd want to go to school every single day. If we had this, you know, it makes me feel so comfortable being here. And it makes me want to go to school every day. It makes me say, you know what, let's go to school and let's learn something. And it seems like it's really tied into the culture, who we are. Oh, I didn't hear that echo, sorry. But yeah, and you know what? And that's something that's really important for us. You know, for so long, you know, we're in this, you know, different schools. You know, a lot of us go to non-native schools, and then sometimes it makes you feel, you know, out of place when you're learning there. And you know, sometimes you come about the history of First Nations people inside of the history book, and you got the 2-page little thing inside there, you know, and you're sitting there like, you know, is this the history about Native people? And you know, you sit there and you wonder, is that all there is to Native people? And this is all non-natives will be learning about, you know, the history of Canada, how Canada came to be. And it makes you wonder, you know, is this how it's gonna continue? Is this how we're gonna grow as Canada, as a country? And they're gonna keep on going. You know, immigrants coming to Canada every single year. And just what they're gonna learn. And I'm thinking to myself, we have to break that cycle. You know, we have to break that cycle. And how do they do that? Is the children, our young people. We gotta educate our young people. We gotta educate who we are, our people. And that's really what it is. Now when the government, when they came and they wanted to assimilate, you know, take the Indian out of the man, like it was said, is that they knew that if we went to the children and we took them away, that's one way we can break the cycle. Is that we try to put these children into institutions that they run, that they control. And that way they can start taking that identity out of their children. And I personally think it's still happening today. You know, we say no, education, that assimilation of our people isn't happening today. Because residential schools isn't happening, because their franchisement isn't happening anymore. But you know what, I think it's happening today through federal and provincial policy. It's happening, we don't even know it. And it's with these new bills and legislation that are coming in, these new fancy things that the government, you know, always shoves in their face. You know, that's foreign to us. I don't want to have to go through that and have to use that, but in a way, you know, we're in this Western society, this Western world. We use this education and we turn it around and we use it against them. And the thing is, you know, I always say it, I always use this reference, is, you know, I feel like in this world, how I walk and carry myself and how I see myself going into the future, it's like I got a moccasin on one foot and I got a sneaker on the other. And having to find that balance to walk, you know, to walk this road, to walk this life, you know, being a Anishinaabe Nene, a young Anishinaabe man, growing up, you know, looking to the future, is that you have to find this balance. But right now, how the education is working is that they're implementing this First Nations Education Act where it says we'll be bound to, you know, what we can regulate in our own school systems. What is the curriculum going to be like? How is the service delivery going to be? Are the proper resources going to be there? We hear about the jurisdiction. You know what jurisdiction is? It's a really fancy word, eh? I first heard jurisdiction when I was younger. I was like, what does that mean? What's jurisdiction? All these fancy words, eh? And it's just basically saying that they're going to assume control. They're going to have the control over how our young people are going to be educated. Now, to me, that doesn't make any sense. You know, traditionally, how it was is that we learned from our parents, we learned from our grandmothers, we learned from, you know, our people, and that's how it was that system. That was our system and how it worked. Is that we learned from our parents, and that's how we had those teachings. I was looking around and I come in here and I seen those teachings on the wall over there. The 7 grandfather teachings. I don't really ever remember that being inside of growing up when I was in elementary school. I don't remember that being inside of high school. But that was something that we've always learned from our grandparents, from our mothers, our parents. I know we spend, how much time do we spend a day in school? How much time do we spend a week in school? How many do we spend our childhood in school? A lifetime, how much do we spend in school? And you think about that, that's a big number, I'm in school, like, even from daycare, so just a little infant, and then I go to elementary school, SK, and I go to school all the way till grade 8. After grade 8, I go to high school. After high school, I'm looking to post-secondary. So by the time I'm done school, I could be 25. That's like 20 years of my life, even more, that I'll be in school, in these institutions that are foreign to me. And you ask yourself, how is this right? And you know what? I think the way that we're going to start, I guess you want to say decolonize, that you hear that word decolonize, is that we got to start being grounded in who we are. And that's what Grand Chief was saying, is that we're developing our own institutions. We're developing our own system. That way we can strengthen our young people. We can say, you know what, this is who you are, at the same time learning, the Western way of society, learning that math. Learning that English on how, we learn that English, and learning, history, but we'll make sure that the history that's taught is the proper history. That the education that's delivered is the proper education. That we know how to build our people. We know that, to have a strong nation, you have to build that foundation with our young people. I think that's what's really important with this education system. But with the First Nations Education Act, I don't see it going anywhere. We heard, that's what it is. It's like taking a step backwards. Look at residential schools. Here's something what's best for you. I don't get that. How they can think that, oh, here's what's best for you. We know what's best for you, without even talking to us. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't make any sense. I don't get that. No consultation. They didn't come up to you and ask you, hey, what do you guys want? How do you guys want to be educated? Their agenda, what they plan on still doing, is still plan on assimilating our people, and that's what this legislation is. It's kind of a secret, we don't see it. It's not out there like, oh, we're assimilating First Nations people still, but that's what it is. And that's why, we have to start taking that control over the education of our young people, because that's our inherent right. We have the right to educate. Our inherent right. We're born with that right to educate our people, to bring up our young people, to empower our youth, our children, to teach them, to educate them on how we see fit, to how we want them to live their life, to strengthen them, to make them feel proud of who they are. And that's what's missing. Who knows if this Education Act goes through? Is there going to be resources? Are they going to be able to have our own curriculum? Are we going to be able to make our own regulations? Now, by the sounds of it, they want to regulate. They want to say what we can and can't do, once again. The Minister of Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development, Canada, who in my eyes is a modern-day Indian agent, is still trying to regulate and tell us what we can and can't do as Anishinaabe people. This is our birthright, where we can say what we want to do, how we want to be educated, how we want to be who we are as people, but they're saying, no, this is how you have to be. They don't have no right. They don't have no right to say that. And yes, maybe we said we're in a crisis. We are in a crisis. If you think about it today, First Nations people as a whole, fastest growing population in Canada. 50% of the Aboriginal population in Canada is under the age of 25. So 50% of population inside of Canada is under the age of 25, is our young people. These is 50%, so that means half of the population are young people. That's the strength of our young people. And they're trying to impose this legislation to us, and and I think it's still going to keep us distracted. So that's why we have to break that cycle. And that's why we can't allow it. I was at the National Youth Summit in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, in November, and the minister, Bernard Valcourt, he comes and he tries to sell youth this Education Act. He attempts to, sugarcoat it, and he's like, this is all nice for you. This is, this is so good for you. And then I could actually see some youth were like, yeah, maybe that's, and I'm just like, whoa, don't let this guy sell this to you. Did you see this guy? He's trying to shove this down your throats, and he's trying to get the youth to say, hey, this is what's best for us. And he's manipulative like that. And then our youth stood up at this summit, nationally, national youth from all across Canada, coast to coast, north to south. And we said, this is not for us. And we told him. He didn't like that. Oh, he didn't like that. He didn't expect that. He thought he was going to come in there and say, hey, this is what's good for you, and he's expecting a big applause for him. I don't think there was any applause. I think there was more hands up, questions raised. People are standing up and they just like, let me at him kind of thing, And I was almost like that because, it was just like our youth recognized that, hey, this is what he's trying to do. And we know that it's not best for us. And we made it clear as young people, this is not what's best for us. We have the right to free, prior, and informed consent. We have the right to say yes or no. We haven't been consulted. We haven't been accommodated. And as young people, we said no to this First Nations Education Act. That's our right to say no, because we believe it's not what's best for us. And we told them, he said, what's the point of going forward if there's so much opposition? If at the National Youth Summit for First Nations, youth from across Canada, First Nations youth said, no, this is not how we want to be educated. We do not want this system for us. We told them to stop. We told them to stop where you are. Don't even bother tabling it. What's the point? You're going to have opposition from us the whole way through. We're not going to endorse it. And we told them you can expect conflict. You can expect even confrontation if you are going to go ahead when you know that we're opposed to this. So that's why it's important that our young people know what this is, this legislation, this act, what they're trying to do. It's important for our young people to know what it is and to know this is not our system. Like I said when I first got up here and started speaking, how would it be to come in to get educated in a school like this, an institution like this? To learn who you are, to ground you in who you are, your identity, so that while learning, everything that, that we need to be a participating member in the Western society, but we could still be grounded in who we are. We have that identity. We'll feel proud, We'll be strong. We'll be unified because we'll know who we are. Having that strength, and being proud, but also having the tool of the Western education. Having your foot in your culture, being grounded in who you are, but also having your other foot in the door, having that education, using that tool to say, hey, this is what we want, this is who we are. And being strong, that's really what needs to happen. Is this First Nations Education Act, is that what it's going to be? Does that allow us to do that? They wouldn't allow us to do that because what they want to do is try to, make it so that we don't have this culture inside of our school. So that we don't have language inside of our school. And that's where we got to turn the tables and say, that's where we're going to start our foundation. And I got to keep on saying that. We have to break this cycle. Because that's how it's always been, is a cycle. And now that we're young people under the age of 25, half of the population of Aboriginal people, First Nations people in Canada, we're the young people who are going to lead the future. We're leading the future today. If we're the leaders of today, we got to empower our young people. We got to help them. We got to raise them up, make them feel good about themselves. How many times have people come into the instance where, oh, you're in school and a non-native person says, oh, you don't have, you get, don't have to pay taxes, you get free education, you get to hunt and fish for free, and then you get all these things said to you, and then you just kind of sink in your chair and you're just like, well, you know, we got to teach our children this. So, you know, this is why, this is your treaty rights, because, you know, we have a treaty right to education. I was looking at that declaration over there. It goes Article 24. It says we have the right to establish our own institutions and teach in the language in our own culture. And that, you know, that's international law. We're protected, constitutionally protected. You know, and it's not just a right that we have, our right to education, to educate our own people. It's our responsibility. Is that we've got to remember that. Yes, we have this right, but we have that responsibility to our young people, to make sure that they grow up knowing who they are. Because who are we as First Nations people, as Anishinaabe people, if we don't have that language, if we don't have that culture, or if we don't even begin to try to retain that? And that's what they're doing, is with this imposed legislation, with the First Nations Education Act, it won't give us any leeway, it won't give us any option to say, okay, well, we want to learn, have the language integrated into our every single day work. That we want to start off the day, you know, we want to have our teachings to be respectful to one another. You know, to love and care for one another. To be truthful. Which will really build who we are. If we can't put this into how we're going to educating our children, then we're just continuing what they want to do. So, I just want to let everybody know, it's good to see a lot of young people here, and you know, this Education Act, you know, it's not for us. We're gonna do things ourselves now. That's the they've been asking us, they haven't been listening. And it seems like it's all just a nice photo op. That's what it seems. Canada is like, oh, this is what we're doing for First Nations education. Yet, you know, you don't see publicity in the media, all the numbers and stuff like that. So, you know, it's just like, let's just take it into our own hands. You know, by being here, this is what you guys are doing. You guys are educating on yourselves this. And that's good. And this needs to help, you know. So if you ever hear something about First Nations Education Act or oppose First Nations education on social media, oppose, share, say, no, we don't want that. And that way, we'll start to have our own education system. That way, we'll break this cycle. And that way, we'll start a new foundation. We'll build a stronger nation, a stronger people, and a stronger future. Miigwech.
Okay, thank you very much to Quinn Miowaski. We are now going to have the drum group outside drum 2 songs for us while we kind of change up and bring out the panel. So you got a 10-minute to go refresh your coffee and do some other things. 10 minutes and the panel will be gone. Have your questions ready, people. And we'd like to thank all those people that are online for viewing. In 10 minutes, we'll resume with the panel. Miigwech.
Everybody else gets the same message. Yeah. Yeah. Good so far.
Steph, just going to mention one thing. Right foot, go up a little bit, like that. Close, raise out. Not over. Yeah, just like leave it normal.
Very.
Have a seat up there. I left the questions up there. You were sent them.
Yeah.
I gave you a copy. Please come back into the room. We're ready to start.
He said there was a letter in the same paper. He doesn't choose to reply to this guy. He says he's notorious racist. There's a letter in the same issue which I am co-writer, and it was by one of his staff. He had someone else do it because he refuses to pay him an argument to this guy. He thinks he's trash. He didn't have it, someone else would do it. And did I see him? He said, most of your back and look at the paper, and he still has How are you today?
Good, how are you?
So nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Brenda.
Okay, we're ready to resume with the panel discussion in room 103.
Is we sitting up there now? Yeah.
I know.
Test on yours.
Test, test.
That's good.
Test, that's good.
Yeah. Test, 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 test. Good.
Test.
Yes, yes. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Now, this part of our session is going to be the panel discussion. We have given all of our guest speakers 3 questions to answer. They're the same questions, and they will have 2 minutes to each answer the question. We'll start off with the first question and allow each of them 2 minutes. And then once we get past the 3 questions, then up here, you will be able to come up here and ask whatever question you want from the panel, or if you want anything explained, any information you didn't understand and want clarified, this will be your opportunity to speak. So all you youth from Lakeview School, that I know you must have lots of questions ready, so this is your opportunity to come up and speak your word. Okay, now does everybody have questions? 1, 2, 3, okay. I don't have questions because I gave it to you. So can I forward that for a minute?
I got another one.
Okay, so the first question is, what will happen if the legislation is passed? Will our education circumstances stay the same? And we will start with Grand Chief Patrick Madabi first, please.
What will happen if the legislation is passed? You know, first of all, we're going to continue to try to see that this legislation does not pass. That's first and foremost. But this government, being as obstinate as they are, you know, may pass this legislation. So we have been negotiating an Anishinaabe education system that will, at least in several Indian Affairs ministers that I've dealt with on this Anishinaabe education system, said we will be not subject to this legislation. So when I said in my commentary earlier this morning about this is a real opportunity for us, it's a challenge, but it's an opportunity, we have to take over jurisdiction here on this education issue. We have to really say what we mean, like we've been saying since 1972 about getting control of our own education. Will our education circumstance stay the same if this thing passes? It'll get worse. First of all, the minister, when he made his remarks, said no new funding. So status quo is not even going to be, you know, what it is right now. You know, with the high costs of everything increasing, and if there's no new funding, we're actually going to be digressing further by having the status quo remain. In fact, there will be no status quo because the current regime of how education services are administered will be replaced by this new bill. And again, compliance, if you don't comply, you're put under third-party management, and some bureaucrat will come in and run your school. So that's what's going to happen.
Okay, that's your 2 minutes. Stephanie Roy, your 2 minutes.
I think when we look at if this legislation passes, is it going to give us better outcomes? Are we going to create more graduates? So right now we're looking at 3 out of every 10 of our students will graduate. Is this legislation going to create more than 3 out of 10 graduates? I'm not convinced, because looking at the contents of that proposed bill in itself, and it has identified 70 plus musts that we have to do, but the biggest piece that we have to be cognizant of is the curriculum that's going to be taught in these schools. And is that curriculum going to allow us to also include who we are as a people, our language, our culture, our heritage, our traditions? Is that system going to allow us to create youth and graduates that are like this young man beside me? I'm not convinced that that's what the system is going to allow. Quinn is the exception, and he's probably one of the 3 that are graduating. So is it going to create more? No, because what we see right now is we already have a system of disengaged youth, unmotivated youth, and youth that face a whole lot of challenges in trying to reach that high school diploma. However, I'm also convinced that it's not because our people and our youth don't have the potential. I think we have to ask ourselves, are our youth failing the system, failing in school? Are they really failures, or is the system failing our youth and our people? I think that's the question, and I'm not convinced that our circumstances are going to change. I'm gravely concerned that they're going to produce less graduates than what we're getting right now, as the bill is proposed.
Thank you, Stephanie Roy. And now Quinn Miyawaski.
Hello, test. Okay, sorry. Well, know, I've always actually asked myself that, you know, what if they actually go through, you know, but, you know, like you know, Grand Chief said, we're going to continue to oppose, you know, and do our best to make sure that it doesn't go through, get passed, but, you know, if it does pass, we're currently developing an education system, you know, like everybody heard, like 17, 19 years in the works. I don't think we should ever let this education, if it comes into play, we should not let it get in the way of our plans. We'll go ahead with our education system full force and we'll say this is our system and we'll show you how much it's going to work for us. Whether you like it or not, we're going to go ahead with it. Because we know what's best for our people. And only we do. So, you know, if it goes ahead, there's no point in saying, oh, well, we lost. You know, oh, well, you know what? No. Too many times they don't listen to us. No, well, why would we listen to them? You know, just makes sense, I guess. Yeah, I think that's what I think we should.
Thank you, Quinn. Okay, we'll move on to question number 2. If you could change one thing about First Nation education, what would it be? Grand Chief Madabi, your 2 minutes.
Obviously, jurisdiction is the big factor here, which means control. You know, one of the reasons why we'll have success, and I alluded to it earlier, is that our most precious resource, our children, you know, is what's at stake here. So we will not allow it to fail. Right now, we don't have control of the system. So we have outside jurisdictions, outside entities trying to teach our children. And, you know, we must direct what happens. You know, that's why it's so important about this control. It's so important about this jurisdiction. So if I was to say one thing, jurisdiction is the key.
Thank you. Stephanie Roy?
If I could change one thing in First Nations education, it would be to look at how we deliver language immersion opportunities within First Nations education. When we look at education systems and we look at French language immersion schools, French language immersion opportunities within the provincial school systems, I hope that we can aspire one day to offer quality immersion programs that are funded at appropriate rates so that we continue to have future generations carry on our languages right across this country.
Thank you, Stephanie. And Quinn?
I think one thing I can change First Nation education will, you know, think of communities on reserve. You know, I think we need to have those rites of passage there again. We need to have those rites of passages for our young people. You know, to show them what it is to become from, you know, from a boy to a man, a young man to a man, and show him his responsibilities. And that way he has those teachings so that, you know, he can go forward, you know, knowing who he is, knowing what his responsibility is, knowing what his role is. And once you teach them that, you know, you strengthen who they are. And then now that they know, learning this Western education, you know, they can know who they are, but, you know, also understand this Western way of educating. But, you know, I think it's important that we look at grounding our people, our youth, and who they are, and we start building a strong future like that.
Thank you very much. Question number 3, the final question. Discuss what an ideal future would look like for First Nation education and how do we obtain this future? Chief Madabi?
I think the way to obtain this in the future, I think back of something that was taught to me by a really great teacher. He's also in this room, Stanley Pelche. It's about our worldview and our language. And he used this example about Benoji. You know, when you hear the word Benoji, you think child. But he said Benoji is much more than that in the Anishinaabe language. He says it tells the whole story of how the Creator placed a little spirit here on Mother Earth, and our responsibility as parents, grandparents, aunties, uncles, cousins, the community, and our nation to raise that little spirit. And the same thing applies here with this whole education process. You know, we need to get fully engaged in nurturing our children, you know, at every level, putting in place support mechanisms, you know, at every level, right, starting at, you know, when the kids go to the nursery school, to track and monitor kids to see if they're having any speech problems or any issues of paying attention, and start dealing with these problems at an early age so that the next elementary school doesn't inherit the problem or the high school doesn't inherit the problem. Let's try to address these things early. The formative years are the crucial years for a child. So you need to deal with that right off the hop, and you'll have a stronger student as you progress. And that's why I think when I talk about the raising that little spirit, what Quinn has mentioned is so crucial. What Stephanie has mentioned about our identity, our language, our culture, these are all crucial to the strength and well-being of a child. Our identity, is so crucial to us being a well-rounded person in our worldview. And I think that's going to win the day here. We don't think like the Jagnash. A moose is a moose, a duck is a duck, and an Anishinaabe is an Anishinaabe. We can't be anything else. We got you.
Thank you. Stephanie Roy?
When we look at the ideal future and what that looks like in First Nations education, that to me is having a system that prepares our children to gain the skills to be successful and to live successfully through a holistic education that continually is able to reinforce our cultural identity as a people. And when we look at holistic education, how are we going to be able to walk firmly grounded with 2 feet, and like Quinn has stated in his speeches, how can we make sure that our culture and our traditions, we're able to carry that within our children and our students, but we also have the academic skills to be successful. So that ideal system will be able to do both of those very well and have the cultural proficiency along with the academic competencies as well.
Thank you, Stephanie Roy and Quinn Miawaski.
An ideal future. I had an opportunity to meet a few young people from the Mi'kmaq territory, and to talk with them and hear, a system that they have for Mi'kmaq people out there, out east, and to know they have 88% graduation rate for their children and youth. And you can see there's this success. Why? As a result of their own system. This education system, we can achieve 88%. We can achieve greater with our own education system. I think, that would be a goal. I think that's, what we want, is to see our children succeed. And to be able to, go on after they went through our education system, to be able to come back to our communities, and to be able to help our communities grow, help build our communities, help point a direction to how our children, our next generation want to be as Anishinaabe people. So I think, where do we want to be? An ideal future is having a system in place that really works for us. Something that we can be proud of and say, just like I said, I want to go to school. Something I want to mention is, I heard that the Mi'kmaq out there, instead of the national anthem, they sing their honor song out there. Isn't that cool? And that's one of the things is that I like to practice is, when I introduce myself, I didn't say my name is Quinn Miawaski, I'm 20 years old, I'm from September First Nation. I was in the language. And you know what? I think the government has to start recognizing that. They got to start, we speaking in our language to them, they have to start understanding that. They should know, they should be able to understand our language. So, I think, once we know that, I think we'll be strong and powerful. We already are, but, we're heading in a good direction.
Thank you, Quinn. Okay, those are the 3 questions that we posed to the panel. Now we're leaving it up to you on the floor to come up and say what you need to say, ask your question, any clarification. So come on up. The panel is waiting for your questions. Yes? Do you want to come up, Stanley?
Miigwech, ani bojo, megeze anang de jnekas, o shkesh no dem, we kwam kong don juba. Udawa nishina benda. Gichi miigwech o agon da gi do jiknango, gi mami ktok, ka kedod ge wino. Gichi nendam non do go, asga butta ging manda, we mi kamang kinomage we nejnikadek. Gichi pitenda got manda. It's more of a comment that I'm going to make rather than a question, but the question would be that with regard to how the government works, how do we expedite what we have to do within the time limit that we have? They've always done this to First Nations people, to put a time limit. You know, they don't give us enough time to organize ourselves to react to what they're going to be proceeding on very shortly. If they're going to be looking at implementing or enacting this First Nation Education Act in September, that doesn't leave us very much time to really sit down and you know, seriously look at some of the procedures we should be going through. And having gone back to work and realizing and looking at how many educated First Nations individuals we have, I think it's about time that we put our minds together. And when we meet in information sessions even, such as this one today, we should be proceeding with many of our traditional ways of you know, communicating and taking our discussion up another level. And that's to have tobacco available. I think it is serious enough for us, you know, this this topic of education and looking at our future with our young individuals to proceed in that way. Those are some of the ways that our elders would have recommended, you know, us to do when serious discussion is happening. I think we're at the point that we should have even a pipe ceremony when we discuss matters of, that are very serious, such as this one. I've been involved in education for a very long time, and in 1985 they took over education in Wakwamacong. And recently, about 10 years ago, they've established a high school. And as the government always requests that you do things, you know, there was a needs assessment as well. And a part of that had to do with what the youth wanted. When it all came out in the wash, 99% of the youth wanted language and culture to be taught in the schools. And what happens is, the government, there is inadequate funding there for us to organize ourselves to plan a curriculum and to plan, you know, a strategy to teach our language so that our children have retention and acquisition. And I think we're looking at this situation again in a similar fashion here because of the time constraints that the government is imposing on our people. We don't really have much time to organize. And I think what I would say is to put you know, our best people together and come up with a procedure to organize ourselves. We work independently. First Nation, Wakwamacong's over there. Ndigobnikading is over here. Serpent River, Garden River. And they're all looking at education, you know, on their own. I think it's time we pull ourselves together and use some of the procedures that our elders would have used. That's to use some of the SEMA and get our people together, you know, that will unify us. There is so much divisiveness in our communities, even from community to community, education authority to education authority. When we do things, we covet things. We shouldn't be even coveting ideas that we have about educating our own people, our young people. We should leave it open for everybody to study it and to implement it. And I'm not critical of people that have worked in education in the past. Everybody, an elder told me when they were teaching me, when they were doing, you know, the programs in education, they were doing their best for the generation that they were living, you know. And they said, we can't be critical. All we have to do is assist in that process. So we need to take some of that divisiveness of our people amongst each other and work together. And I think the procedure exactly to follow, we touch on it. Chief Midabi here mentioned that I think the AFN has a role. The Union of Ontario Indians has a role. Our education authorities have a role. Our own committees on the reserve level have a role. And we need to integrate a lot of our procedure with the ceremony that the elders could provide for us. It takes it one more level. It takes it to the spiritual level. And when we speak, we should be speaking with that tobacco. And, you know, that's asking, you know, the forces that be from the four directions to be with us. And so those are some of the things that, you know, that I think, you know, we should be considering, you know, like immediately, you know, to try and, you know, work together a little bit more. And I like the way you explain the word Binogi, about what our language is. When we look at our language, we can't be, you know, fragmenting education the same way that, you know, mainstream society is doing. I think language and culture is one. When we teach language, we shouldn't categorize it just as language. We're going to end up as, you know, teaching our languages as English as a second language. We need to teach it in much the same way as Chief Midabi explained the word Binogi. In the Ojibwe creation story, we didn't start off with a blank slate. In that blank slate that that you hear about in creation stories, scientists now postulate that the world came from a big bang, from a blank slate. In the Ojibwe creation story, we say that it wasn't blank. What was there in that void, so it wouldn't have been a void, was knowledge. And that's a part of who we are. And we knew, by using our tobacco, how to work with that, how to proceed in a lot of things. And that's what guided us. And it still guides us today. And it's a part of who we are. And it's a part of our language. All that history is locked in our very syllables and our words and the sounds of our letters. And even how we define education. We say, Akenomage. Puts in the realm of living things. Ke puts all those living things on the earth. No ge means to direct. That's what the teacher does. Where do we find knowledge? Ama. Right here on the earth. We need those words to guide us so that we can proceed with this education, you know, in a proper way for our young people, such as this young man wanted today, what he's asking for. It's in our language. We can give it to our youth. And the last syllable of that word is ge, which means that you physically and ourselves do it. The teacher does it. And that ties up knowledge to the universe, It ties it up astrally. That's where it is. And that's our philosophy of education. So we need to get our brains together. All the people that are educated. I know we have a lot of PhDs amongst us now. We need them to write, you know, our concepts, our ideas, our beliefs. And it has to be done now. We can't be waiting anymore, you know, for the Education Act to tell us what we're going to do. When third-party officials come and run our programs at the First Nations level. So I think it's critical that we act and answer for all those young people that are out there and give them what they want. Miigwech.
If I could just respond to that.
Thank you, Stanley. We're going to get some response from our panel on your comments.
I couldn't agree more with the need for our spiritualism and our ceremony to be involved. And I recall, you know, quite a number of years ago when they tried to cut out post-secondary funding altogether, there was a sacred fire lit, and the coals of that sacred fire went from community to community. We fought back the cutting off of post-secondary funding. This was quite a number of years ago. When this legislation was envisioned, we've also gone into ceremony. There's been sweats, there's been pipe ceremonies in preparation for our fall assembly, where we eventually endorsed the Anishinaabeg education system to go to the next level of being taken out to our communities for ratification. Chief Shining Turtle and I fasted on Dreamer's Rock for several days and went into sweats and did pipe ceremonies to prepare for those discussions. So I couldn't agree with you more. In terms of time, yes, we have a crucial element of time in terms of what this particular government is doing. But you know something, I've been around politics for quite a number of years now, and I've seen something like to the tune of 28 to 30 ministers of Indian Affairs come and go. I don't know how many prime ministers have come and gone. And guess what? The Anishinaabeg are still here. You know, these governments come and go, and you know, what this government tries to put in place, you know, they will never be successful. And, you know, we will turn it around either with this government or the next government. As I said in my earlier commentary, you know, now is the time for us to have political discipline and unity. You know, we had the inspiration, you know, to put in place our own Anishinaabeg education system. And we put into perspiration the hard work that was needed to develop this system. Now we need the most critical element is the implementation of implementing this. And we can't be deterred. We can't be swayed by somebody else's agenda. You know, we have to stay the course here. And as I said in my comments earlier as well, let's get the jurisdictional component together. We can tweak and fashion, you know, how this has to be done. There's not a one-size-fits-all solution here, you know. It's like, you know, trying to fashion a curriculum when, you know, our language compared to the Mohawk, for example, is just the same as the difference between Chinese and Greek. There's nothing similar. You know, so we have to look at our Anishinaabeg way of our worldview. So I can't agree, you know, enough with what Stan has said, you know, particularly about the ceremonial part of this that will strengthen what we do. And that's one thing that the government has never been able to do, is defeat the spirit within us. And they'll never do it.
I think one of the points that I took away from Stan's comments is we have to ensure that our Anishinaabeg philosophy is in our education system. And I agree wholeheartedly that when we look at language and culture, they are not separate in that they are together. And as we develop that education system so that we can build our nation, they are intricately connected and you can't separate them. So absolutely for the language and culture. The last point I just want to make is how do we look at the timelines that are before us, because I think that's the real threat that we have going forward is the timeline. So if this is going to take effect for the fall, we do need to organize ourselves, and if we don't, I'll use the analogy that my coworkers have shared over the last few months is, you know, we're boiling in a pot and we don't even know it, and it's a slow boil, and until we realize and we're able to actually put a plan in place, then we need to be able to move forward with an action plan. So it's going to take all of us to work together, and Stan's mentioned we do have people in our communities that have the knowledge and skills to move this forward. Miigwech.
I think a lot of pretty wicked awesome points you got there, man. That's pretty good stuff you got, man. And that's the thing what I got is that, you know what, our elders, our knowledge keepers, spiritual advisors. You know, at some point, you know, maybe, you know, we lost that disconnection where our young people would sit there and listen to our elders. They have so much to give to our young people. And that's something that we really need to happen. We need to bring our young people back together with our elders. Our elders pass on every single year, and sometimes they pass on without information, without ever sharing it, because, you know, they haven't had the opportunity to share it with any young people. So that information that they had could have possibly been lost. And that's what I think, you know, it's scary. That's scary to think. And, you know, we have to start, you know, going to our elders and saying, teach us, show us the way. Show us the way. Tell us a story, you know. Having that connection with the elders and youth. I think, you know, that our elders and youth coming together strong, you know, that's you know, I think the government is scared of that. You know, they should be too. You know, they really, really, really should be. But, you know, as time goes on, we only have so much before they're going to table this bill, this act. So we got to continue to oppose. We got to continue to, you know, stand up against it. We got to continue to say why. And we look to non-natives as well and say, you know, this isn't right for us. Help stand with us. Stand with us and support us and say this is not for us. I think that's what we got to do, is we got to continue to say no and educate ourselves the way we're doing right now. Is by the more we educate ourselves on, you know, this First Nations Education Act, the more we get that idea, that whole thought process started within our people, and saying, hey, we can create our own systems. Hey, you know, we can take education by the horns and we'll do it ourselves. And you get that discussion going, you get them excited, and you know what, like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. And then your movement starts without even knowing it. But there's a movement that's happening right now. So I think we just got to keep on, you know, adding fuel to that fire, and bridging that gap between our elder and youth. And I think, you know, we're going to have, you know, challenges ahead of us. As long as we remember who we are and where we want to go, I think we're in the right path. Thank you.
You know, say we have to also, you know, let the general public know that we're not just opposing this for the sake of opposing it. We have a solution, you know, which is our own system. You know, I wanted to read something here. This was originally Duncan Campbell Scott, one of the original superintendent of Indian Affairs. He said, I want to get rid of the Indian problem. Our objective is to continue until there is not a single Indian in Canada that has not been absorbed in the body politic, and there's no Indian question and no Indian department. I like that last part, no Indian department.
Got something right.
Yeah, but you know, it's critical that, you know, we continue our efforts and not get strayed by somebody else's agenda.
Thank you. Well, first I want to thank everybody for doing this. I'm learning a lot here. And I want to introduce myself. My name's Joseph Gold, and I live in Kagawong. My wife is here. And I want to be one of the people that assists you and stands with you. I won't say how excited I am. I loved everything I've heard, but I'm really excited by Quinn's presentation. He gives me hope, and I've been an educator all my adult life. So I spent 35 years teaching in universities in Canada, mostly in University of Manitoba and in the University of Waterloo for the last 24 years before I retired and came here. So I've got a question to just throw in there, but I just want to make one comment that I think Quinn, everybody needs to think about. And I want to tell you, Quinn, that in the 1940s in England, when I went to school, and in the 50s, when I went to school, and until I managed to escape from England, what I learned was, I see now, was education in an expansionist imperial society. So I want you to know that all those people who are so hostile and so closed-minded were taught. We're talking about children, and it's the same with all people, and they all have to be remedied, healed from lies and brainwashing and distortion that they experienced, that turned them into vicious colonials who did terrible things to other people all over the world, from Europe. And that is who we're also working for. If you can do it, you will be doing it for everybody in Canada. Because nothing will be right in Canada until we account for what we have done here. And so I want to say, it's a big question. And this education superiority and paternalism is ugly, inappropriate, misinformed, negative, damages the entire population of Canada. Now, it's easier for me to say this than for you to say it, because you don't want to turn into sort of righteous preachers to the non-natives, but I can say it because I experience in my community a level of prejudice and racism that's anti-native, which is offensive. I find it offensive living here and hearing this, and many conversations have ended because I walked out on them, being unable to stand the kind of hostility. But these people were educated in schools. How did they learn not to love their community and their sisters and brothers of any color? They've not been taught how to behave decently in communities. So that's what I want to add to what I heard here. And the other thing I want to say is that I'm sort of surprised to hear about this Education Act. starting to tamper with the jurisdictional lines between federal and provincial. That amazes me that this has suddenly been introduced. Not that I'm in love with the Department of Indian Affairs or the federal responsibilities, but this is a constitutional matter. And if they're suddenly going to just jerk around the Constitution because they are ruthless, they will take any means to secure the oil resources and the mineral resources of this country, and nothing will stop this government. That's what they're about. They're not about governing or forming community or nation building or healthcare. They're not about any of that, or education funding. I believe and I assert that this cabinet and this prime minister have no interest in nation building. The only interest they have is in a geographical Canada with resources. And their main job is to keep obstacles out of the way of resource development. That's what this is all about. So they're still on this track of getting rid of native culture, because native culture has at its root, as I understand it, its connection with the land. Well, the land is what they're after, and what's underneath the land. And if they're backed up by a whole people educated in Britain to be colonial, they're not going to get any opposition or argument from that group, who will have little bits of this land everywhere and are terrified that this issue is going to threaten them in some way. So my question is, you might need a legal challenge of some sort, and I just want to throw out the question, doesn't this provincial and federal conflict that's suddenly been tossed into the ring here, we're suddenly going to have education not transferred to the federal government, but transferred back to the provincial government, which is where it's been for non-natives, but now it can be lumped in with non-native education. Wouldn't that be a good place to launch a constitutional challenge? You say, and I agree with you, and it's a worry, it's anxiety making, that they put you under time pressure. But never underestimate the value of delaying. Queen Elizabeth I was the greatest strategist for building empire. Goes back a long way, right? She didn't support slavery until Mr. Smith, I think it was, right? Raleigh walked in and said, well, listen, it's not such a bad thing. If you support slavery, you make this much money. And she said, oh, I suddenly think it's a good idea to have slaves. So then the slave business became supported by the Queen. Well, I mean, this is like going back to the roots of this conflict, and the Crown is not listening anymore. I wonder why. Anyway, I'm suggesting that she knew about delaying. She had umpteen kings and queens wanting to marry her, and she delayed everybody and didn't get married. They were all sitting, playing the game. She's clever at that. I think we need to be clever at that. We need to postpone. We need to gain time. Tie it up in the courts. Find sympathetic lawyers who do it pro bono. Don't need to spend a fortune on lawyers. There must be people who are very sympathetic out there. We have native lawyers that we're currently reading about who are extraordinary. Write to them. Get them on board. I want to be active. Anyway, thanks for your patience. I just want to.
Should make you aware that in terms of strategies, there's many different strategies. I have addressed this issue of education and health and many other issues we're having with this government with the UN Rapporteur on Thanksgiving Day. I met with the UN Rapporteur, and there are legal challenges that are being mounted, and there's many other things that's going on. But there's also the other side of it, which is the downloading of some constitutional responsibilities to the province. That's being challenged. We have actually, as I said in my remarks earlier, we have this particular Premier Wynne, is working quite closely with us and does not support this education legislation, and she's very critical of it. But they're trying to do it in other areas. And you're very right about the Prime Minister going all over the world selling out this country, you know, with the resources that are in this land. So there's no doubt it's a big struggle, but you know, we're a resilient people. Yeah, we've withstood many different onslaughts against us. And the other thing is, you know, it's kind of ironic, you know, what Quinn was saying, you know, that's why it's so important for us to get control of our education to tell our story. Their history would have you believe that when Champlain or Cabot sailed down the St. Lawrence, that was the start of Canada. When we'd been here for thousands and thousands and thousands of years with our own history, our own governance. You know, there was millions of Anishinaabe here on Turtle Island before they come and give us diseases that eliminated so many of our people. So.
Pierre Dubosky, Dijnakas. My question is, what would happen to the First Nation schools if this Education Act passes?
Like your school?
Yeah.
Name your school.
Like
my school.
Lakeview School.
Like Lakeview School. Okay.
I'll answer that first, Pierre. Miigwech Pierre, and thank you for being so brave to come up and ask the question, Pierre. Pierre has asked a really good question. What does this mean for the schools in our community? And Pierre is in the community here in Chiging. So how it would be is it really depends on the option that is chosen by the community. So in my presentation really quickly I showed you those three main options or those three doors. So it really depends upon which option the community picks. So with your chief and council, Pierre, they're going to decide and choose that option based on what they see fit. And they're going to make that choice based on what they feel is best for our schools and our communities. So with those options, and like you said, and like I illustrated in that slide, was in that first option, if a community stands alone, not too much will change other than there will be a inspector that comes into the school, and they currently don't go into the schools, but an inspector will come into the schools and they'll have a checklist and they'll say, have you done this, this, and this, and they'll go through the whole school and make sure that the school is doing what the government has said that they will do. So that's the biggest change that we'll see is we'll now have those inspectors coming through our schools quite regularly, making sure that we're doing what we're supposed to. If we're not doing what we're supposed to, then we'll see the changes happen in terms of who is going to come in and make sure that it happens. And that's where we said there may be other parties that will take over and run the school if we don't do what they tell us to do. That'll be one of the biggest changes we'll see if communities choose that option. The other option they might pick is maybe the provincial school board in our area, and for us it's Rainbow District School Board. The options that they're giving is for them to be able to say, we'll purchase the services so that the Rainbow District School Board can come and run our school. So if that's an option, they might pick that. But we don't know what option they're going to pick, and that's why it's important for us to make that known to our leaders and our chief and councils in our communities.
You've heard that story, eh? If you have one arrow, it's how easy it is to break it apart. You know, I think if you stand alone, you're going to get picked apart. This is a time for us to stay together. This is a time for us to have some unity and some political discipline. And I don't believe status quo, even if you do stand alone as a school, is going to happen, because they haven't come clear on all the changes. You know, the hidden agendas, they have not come clear on this legislation. They haven't said everything they're going to do. So, you know, it's a dangerous, slippery slope. And I think, you know, we need to get control of what we're doing. We need to stay united. And then we can have offshoots and variances catered to the specific needs of the individual schools or clusters of schools. But that's where we got to go, in my opinion. I don't think there's three options.
If you're concerned, you know, about what's going to happen to your school, change in your school, you know, it's, you know, you can have a positive impact on what happens in your school. You really can, because young people have the power. And that's what I've come to learn. I help organize youth conferences. I help, you know, facilitate, you know, and speak at youth conferences. And a lot of what I say isn't me. I just simply echo the voices of the youth. So it's a lot of, you know, what the youth are saying. And, you know, I think if you really want to say, this is how I want my education, maybe get some of your friends together and be like, you know what, how do we want our education? What do we want our education to look like? Just get some friends together in your school, maybe, you know, maybe ask your teacher, say, hey, could we have a day or a time in class or something where we can say, hey, we want to tell you how we want our school to be run. We want to tell you how we want to be educated. We want to tell you, maybe, you know, we want culture here, we want the language here, and you can tell them. And you know what, I think, you know, you can make that, and with the support, you know, you have my support. I'm sure you have, you know, the rest of the panelists here support, you know, our leaders, your teachers, your parents support. So you know what, I think, you know, just tell them how you want to be educated. Tell them what you want, you know, and I don't think they'll say no to you. So just, you know, just get some friends and, you know, just casually talk. You know, I want to be educated in this way. This is what I want for my future. And you know what, I'll be right there with you, man.
Just go.
Hi, so my question is why? Why do you think that the government, in your opinion, keeps taking away everything that we have and everything that we've worked for? They're limiting ourselves. Why do we do that? Why do we let them do that?
Well, I don't think it's a question of, sorry, turn this thing on again. I don't think it's a question of why do we let them do it. I think the problem is we are not coming from a position of strength ourselves. We're under an Indian Act system when we should be coming forth as nations, you know, with a strong identity. Why they're doing it? They're doing it, just as the gentleman said, and I commented as well, that they're after our lands and our resources. That's what it's been since the first ships ever left the coastal ports of many of the colonial countries, not only England, Spain, France, and traveled all over the world. And if you even look at what's going on today, look at what the United States, for example, says. They're going around the world spreading democracy. You know what they're spreading? A bunch of manure. Because what they're really after is the resources of any of those countries that they're after. You know, and if they can't get it one way, they create a war or a conflict. They go in, bomb the hell out of the place. Then they get all the contracts because they own the munitions as well. They bomb the place. Then they get all the contracts to rebuild it. And then they incur a major debt from that country. And how does that country pay back the debt? They have to give up all their resources. What do you think the first thing they did when they went to the moon? First thing they checked to see if there were any Anishinaabe there. And then the next thing they did was plant a flag and then tested for minerals. You know? That's what they're after.
I don't know if I'm on here. Am I on?
I think really quickly, Sarah, you've another brave girl to come up and ask a question. Why are they doing it? When we look at the policies that have been created for the last 50 years, the policies are an assimilationist policy. So with what that means is they want us to be Canadians, and it's really hard for them to accept that we're Anishinaabe first and will always be Anishinaabe. So they create these policies, which we call assimilationist policies, and they want us to be Canadians, and we are asserting that we're Anishinaabe first.
One thing that, I will always say and I always hold true is that, I'm not a Canadian, personally. I'm not a Canadian, To the government, I'm just 201-008-0502, a number. And, that's all they recognize me as. But, I'm Anishinaabe, I'm not Canadian. And that's something I always hold true. And, to identify as your Anishinaabe. And, what they're trying to do is is what they've always trying to do. Is they just want land, they want resources, it's capitalism, they just want to expand, they want to grow. But you know what's standing in their way? It's us, First Nations people. And that's our responsibility. Is that we have that right to that land. We have the right to hunt and fish. We have the right to the land. We have the right to the water, to the trees. It's our responsibility to the land, to the trees, to the water, to animals, to protect them. And we're the stewards, we're the keepers. And we got to continue to do that. Because if we don't step up, ain't going to be nothing left for your children. Ain't going to be, I hear my grandpa say, I used to swim and fish there all the time. Ain't no fish there. You can't swim there no more. And these are stories. So what's going to happen? What are you going to tell your children? I think, we got a good, young, strong young leaders, come up, stand, be brave like that. I was never able to speak like this. I never come up with like you guys. So good job. I applaud you guys. Right on. But yeah, let's stay together, and we'll protect what's for everybody, not just for First Nations people, but for humans as a whole, for four races of men. Holistically as as peoples of Mother Earth. We got to protect it for the next generation. So it's up to us, and let's keep at it. Yeah, thanks. Good question.
Okay, before everybody leaves, we just like to wrap up here and say thank you to our 3 guest speakers that came in for winter teaching. Like to thank the committee of the winter teaching who put this all together in very short time because we had to start right after the Christmas break. We're now going to say miigwech to our 3 guests and present them with a gift to take home. And then we're going to break for lunch because you're probably hungry. What? Stan?
Forgive me for my outburst earlier, but I wanted to mention what Rainbow District School Board is doing for our First Nations in our territory here. I think Rainbow District School Board is very progressive in the way that we look at programming for First Nation students, that do have to attend our schools. And I'm very happy to say that, our people are within the administration of the Rainbow District School Board. We have with us today Kathy Bilkis, who is a superintendent and a principal, at the Rainbow District School Board. And as Patrick has said, we have, a trustee here.
Mr.
So, they're really interested into some of the things that, that we want to do for education for the First Nation students in our territory. So, I meant to mention that earlier, miigwech.
Yes. Thank you, Stan. We do have plenty of provincial school boards that are doing their optimum best to work with our First Nation communities, and we do thank them always. So we'd like to present a thank you gift to our 3 presenters, our Executive Director, Stephanie Roy, for her education perspective on the First Nation Education Act. Give her the big blue box. Yep. And we'd like to thank our Grand Chief, Patrick Madabi, for giving us the political perspective on the First Nation Education Act.
We'll switch those around.
And we'd like to thank our youth representative, Quinn Miawaski, for giving us the youth perspective. So we are going to wrap up this part now in Wiesnick. Dinner is, corn soup is being served. And we're also going to have the drum group do us a couple of more songs before they leave, and like a travel song. So miigwech for everybody coming, and thank you very much to all our people online. We hit over 100 people on our live feed. Wow. Thank you. Miigwech. Just fill out your evaluations before you leave. It's all going nuts. Surveys at the front table, please fill them out. If you fill out a survey and leave it, you get to enter your name in a draw for a $75 Foodland card. Wow. And you can always use with food, right?
Look at them Foodland card.
Sure they do.
Oh, that's pretty.
Why, you come back up north, Peter.
Hi, my name is Brian.
Oh, look at that.
Peter.
Oh, nice. Now we gotta get a picture. Now, isn't that just the perfect one for you? Okay, picture together in front of the...
See, I'm Jewish. My experience is it was too costly not to be a citizen. There was no provision made for me to have a different point of view, or not to have to listen to the Jesus. I mean, they just, it was all overwhelming. Every day in assembly, the maps, all the sea of red, the worship, the schoolboy manuals, were all where we conquered everybody. There were no details about what we did when we conquered them. They just painted the map red, and that's it. So I think they need to know that. This is not coming out of nowhere. No, it's part of the culture.
Right now, I'm working, my brothers and I, 12 of us. We're a big family. We've got a mate. Process of getting that we're having some issues because some problems with the size